Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Let's Get Down to Business. On this edition, I have with me Ms. Shanika John. She's the Health Promotion Officer in the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment. More with her when we come back.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business. Let's Get Down to Business is a collaboration between the Chamber of Industry and Commerce and IKTV. Like I said on this edition, my guest is Ms. Shanika John, the Health Promotion Officer in the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment. On this edition, we're going to talk about COVID-19. We're going to talk some vaccine issues and generally the state of play in terms of where we are in managing the pandemic. Shanika, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you. I know you've been doing the circuit 10 times over, and you're exceptionally busy. And I guess it's a job that you sleep, eat, and drink.
Definitely, most definitely. But thank you for having me as well.
Now let's roll back to basics. Let's talk about vaccination. What is vaccination?
So vaccination is a public health measure that we use across the globe to ensure that people are protected and safe from any disease or any virus that is out there. The whole idea of vaccination is not new. It's something that we saw years before I was even born, in terms of where public health officials and researchers would use to sort of mitigate and slow the spread of any deadly virus or bacteria. For me as an individual, and even for you, and for those of you who have children, your children would have received their vaccines just in their childhood period there. The MRI vaccines where they would have been administered here in St. Vincent and globally. There are quite a number of vaccines that are available globally. And so the COVID-19 virus vaccine is just one of the fairly new ones that has been surfacing.
So is that what makes it so controversial and maybe a little hard to accept by the vaccine hesitant people? I'm not talking about the anti-vaxxers because I think that's a different level. But the people who are hesitant, is it because it's very new and came to market seemingly very quickly?
So I think it's a fair consideration for an average person to say, well, we've been in the pandemic for over a year. Things are happening around us. Variants are coming up new and new, and then we have a vaccine. What's going on? Hold up. But I also think it's important for us to go back a little bit. When the SARS group of virus started to show itself back in 2003, thereabout, we started to have basic information. And when I say we, I mean public health officials and researchers had very basic information to go on. But at the time, it was not as widespread. So there was not sufficient information for them to continue with the vaccine trial. If we fast forward to 2020, where COVID-19 virus has impacted almost every sector, not almost, I think we're past almost now.
Every sector.
Every sector, every planet, every island, every state in this globe has a case or cases of COVID-19 virus. And so when you see that happening, there is automatically a rush to get something that could mitigate and slow the spread. And so that's where the vaccine went back to the foundation and tried to enhance it so that it could be available to us today.
So strictly speaking, it is not something that just started to be developed as COVID-19 came onto the scene.
Correct.
So there was a foundation of research and development for the SARS-related type. So in essence, what appears to be something that just came into being because of COVID is not exactly true.
Yes. And I remember in 2013, I think around that time I had just joined the ministry. We had a SARS scare in St. Vincent, where I remember it very clearly. I was in the ministry. I think the person was at Stubbs Polyclinic. And so the officials in the ministry were going back and forth, trying to prepare for a release for the public and also trying to ensure that the detection was picked up. The person eventually tested negative, but 2013, that SARS group of body also consisted of the coronavirus. So that grouping of viruses is also what they use as a foundation to get us to this point in 2021.
And as you mentioned, SARS, I remember because prior to COVID, I traveled fairly often and wide afield. And I remember in particular, the Asian group of people, basically the Chinese. I'd see them in airports and so on, and majority of them are wearing masks, So it's interesting to see that now the entire world, since COVID-19 has picked up the mask protocol. Let's talk about some of the early myths about the COVID-19 vaccine. It is made from fetal matter.
So
where did that come from?
I mean, sometimes you have to really sit and wonder and ask yourself. I think people are accustomed to getting information that is quick and easy. And sometimes this is from social platforms and it's always not reliable. So I think even ahead of the vaccine information getting out there, we had a lot of persons who strongly believe that people shouldn't take the vaccine, let's call them that. And so they jump ahead of some information. And I think that was one of the ways in which they were able to fill and overwhelm individuals with information. But the vaccine does not have a live virus. There's no live virus in it. I have no clinical background in me, so I'm not going to go too much in detail.
That's fair enough.
And so you really want to focus on the fact that it's just a component that we're getting. I mean, one of the other things that people start to say about is that there's a chip in our vaccine. And Tony, I always say that if you consider all of the devices that we carry around on a daily basis, I mean, the easiest way to get a chip to track us is with our cell phones. Now we have AirPods, we have Fitbit watches and Apple watches, and you name it, to track our steps and our movements, etc. Those are all areas that they could actually track us and insert this chip. But I think people got a little antsy and uncomfortable when you start talking about ingesting something into your body. And so the research and the science and the information is there to support that there is no chip and that a chip cannot pass through specific needle.
Right.
And I've even heard some persons who strongly believe that people shouldn't take the vaccine dismiss that to say that there is no chip in the vaccine.
And then, of course, there's this mark of the beast, the 666, which really plays on the mind of people who have these deep religious convictions. How is the Ministry of Health dealing with debunking that?
So in particular, for that particular area, we've had several discussions with churches in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I mean, most recently, we had a webinar with the Adventist Mission locally and regionally as well, where we looked at what's the church position in terms of vaccines Because, I mean, people need to start to realize that vaccines are not new. So before you even get into COVID-19 vaccine, sometimes you really have to take people back a bit. So even for the Adventists, they have clearly established that there is no religious ground to say that you cannot take vaccine. And in fact, even I think 2015 thereabout, they wrote a note that states that they encourage and they support vaccination in an effort to mitigate and slow spreads of viruses around the region. And so they hold firmly to that as part of their health upkeeping and so forth. Fast forward to 2020, we have persons, not just from Adventists, but other religions are thinking that the COVID-19 vaccines is automatically the mark of the beast. And so that in itself generated from the idea of knowing that based on your religious belief that everybody should have it, and you would need this special mark to be able to access goods and
of course,
services
it's like
and travel.
revelations, right? It's being fulfilled. And I think that whole prophecy fulfillment is what's underpinning their conviction.
Yes.
And it must be a big challenge. The other thing, of course, is the claim that you don't need the vaccine because you are washed in the blood. And you can't believe that and still take the vaccine. How are you managing that one?
So for those persons, I always say to them that God is not selective with who he takes care of and who he watches over. I believe and I strongly hold that he loves and cares for everybody equally. And taking a vaccine or not taking a vaccine does not equate to any greater or lesser love from God. And I think that is something that we learn Sunday school, Sabbath school, way back down there. So for those persons, I generally would say to them that if you are worried about what the effects of the vaccine would do on you because of your religious belief, for years we have been advising persons that, God has the final say. And so we pray and we ask God that my intent of taking this particular vaccine is to be able to reduce severity of the virus on my body, is to be able to give my body a fighting chance, to reduce hospitalization where it may be necessary. And so, Lord, I'm taking this vaccine. And if there's anything that is in it or anything that goes against what I stand for, I'm asking you to step in. And I say to them, how many times a day have you stepped out and you've asked for forgiveness, knowingly or unknowingly? And he clearly says over and over that into the sea of forgetfulness is where he's going to take all of our sins. So, and people would, kind of pause for a second because they don't expect that the public health official will stand those grounds. But that's what I strongly believe.
Well, of course, this religious stuff is above my head, and I tend to stick to the science. And let's get back to the science of the vaccine. What two terms became very popular when the vaccine was being released? Efficacy and effectiveness. And let's examine those. What's the difference?
So efficacy and effectiveness are very common, and so you tend to see or hear people use them interchangeably. The reality is that effectiveness is the vaccine's ability to do what it's supposed to do in the real world. Would it slow and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus? Would it reduce hospitalization of persons who are affected with the coronavirus? And so we're seeing that.
Right.
Efficacy is the vaccine's ability to actually slow the transmission within the individual purpose. And so we're also seeing that as well in terms of the variants that we're seeing, where the different vaccines are now measuring their efficacy, which is their ability to reduce transmission, with the Delta variant, the Gamma variant, and the Mu variant as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, we are at the end of our first segment. So when we come back, we will do a bit more vaccination talk, and then we'll get into your protocols, and also the substantive thing I want to discuss is the workplace, how we deal with COVID-19 in the workplace. So let's go to the break. You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business, or more with my guests when we come back from the break.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Fincensions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service, to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrocin General Insurance Company.
This is Let's Get Down to Business. My guest on this edition is Ms. Shanika John. She is the promotion officer, health promotion officer in the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and the Environment. Shanika, when we went out to the break, we were talking about efficacy and efficiency. Let us now look at the various strains, because initially it was just the COVID-19, and now we're talking about the Delta variant, the Mu variant, and so on. Tell me what they are, and basically what are we experiencing in St. Vincent?
So in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we currently have present local transmission. When I say local, I mean that we have persons in St. Vincent who may or may not have a travel history recently, and so they don't have a travel history actually, and so they have tested positive for the coronavirus, and then further testing that goes on to CARFA, they would have been detected to have one of the variants. The variants that we do have is the Delta, the Gamma, and the Mu variant. So we have 3 variants here in St. Vincent local transmission. What we're seeing specifically with the variants is that unlike the normal COVID-19 strain of virus, the variants are a little bit more aggressive, especially the Delta variant. So with the coronavirus strain, it takes you about 5 to 7 days before you start to have symptoms or you start to feel sick. With the Delta variant, it takes you as low as 3 days from your exposure. So you're exposed today to the table. It takes you about 3 days before you start to get symptoms, start to feel that flu-like-ish. With the normal strain, we're seeing 5 to 7 days at least. The interesting thing is that with the variants present in St. Vincent, we're looking at more hospitalization, which is what we're seeing. More people are required to be hospitalized. Hence the reason we had to do some adjustments in our hospital services to accommodate those persons who are requiring hospitalization. It means that more people are going to show up at our accident and emergency, at our flu clinics, sick, as in flu-like sick. And it also means that there's going to have to be a lot of treatment to care for those persons who are severe. And so that is really just in an effort to make them stable, because the variants are actually going for more or less multiple organ failure, where so they actually go into your system and they work much, much quicker than the normal strain. So it's really important for detection. If you're not feeling well, do not stay at home and try to get rid of the cold. Do not take over-the-counter medication, because your oxygen level, your body's ability to retain fluids, etc., all of these things are impacted, and that could be very detrimental to you, especially if you fall within the vulnerable group. That is, persons who are older and you have a pre-existing condition, children, women who are pregnant, persons who are generally have weak or compromised immune system for many different reasons. These are the people who especially need to try to seek care early.
And as we talk about the variants and COVID-19 itself, of course, the one that we started out with,
flat strain,
right? And we relate that to the vaccine. The various vaccines that are available here in St. Vincent are what?
The vaccines that we have in St. Vincent are the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Sputnik V vaccine, and the Pfizer vaccine. AstraZeneca and Sputnik and Pfizer are eligible for persons 18 years and older. Unlike other countries, we do not have at this moment priority group. So we're not saying persons 18 to 35 could get it and everybody else wait. We're open to all age groups. And that's not because we have vaccines that are not good and we want to just give away. It's just that we've understand that our situation in country is different.
Correct.
So we're opening it up to all pools.
Plus you don't seem to have that demand.
See, I was trying not to say that. The Pfizer vaccine in particular as well is eligible for persons 12 years and older. That's our children there. So those are the persons who are eligible. all of our vaccines are showing that they have good efficacy in terms of being able to stand up against the Delta variant in particular. So we are confident that even those persons who are vaccinated and you do get the virus, the COVID-19, and even if you do get one of the variants, we're still not seeing that increased hospitalization among those persons who are vaccinated.
So the message about the vaccine in terms of its real value is that not that it will prevent you necessarily from contracting the virus. It probably lessens your chance from contracting the virus, but you may very well still do so.
Yes.
And in the event that you get the virus, this is the real message about the vaccine. It is seriously reducing the risk of serious illness, hospitalization, or death. And I'm going to give you, I said it, and I'm going to give you a chance to expound on that.
And that's exactly what we're seeing. So in all of the persons who are hospitalized for COVID-19 over the period that we've had this spike, we've had just about maybe 5 or so, less than that. I don't have the accurate statistics right now in terms of those persons who've been hospitalized. And that's really just for monitoring. Some persons fall in that particular vulnerable group where age is concerned. So they need to be monitored closely and to track. We've had persons who've been discharged.
Right.
As a result of their hospitalization. But in the unvaccinated group, the severity is much higher. They require longer hospitalization. And so their turnaround times in terms of being able to recover is slower. So a lot of them are unfortunately not making it out alive.
Right. So I was about to say that so far, of all the deaths that you've had, there's not been a vaccinated person in that group.
Yes.
So far. But I think, Shanika, it's important to make the point that may very well happen. A person who is vaccinated may very well die of COVID.
Yes.
But does that change the argument?
No, it doesn't. And so we have to look at the science. I mean, if we're going to start, and my condolences to the family if you're watching this program right now, but if you're going to look at 33 persons unvaccinated who've died from COVID-19 in the last 2 months versus 1 person fully vaccinated who've died from COVID, the science is clear that there is a complete clear distinction between those persons who are vaccinated and those who are not vaccinated. And that's really why we are selling it. And I know for the older population, our most precious and prized population, we really want to try and protect them. But they're not leaving home, and some of them can't afford to leave home because of different things. And so those of us who can leave home are going about our lives, going about our interactions, forgetting that we need to protect them. So I always say to young people in particular, working people like myself, we move a lot. But at the end of the day, we go home to those people who cannot move or who are not moving because they're trying to protect themselves. But what are you doing to ensure that you add that extra layer of protection for them? And vaccination is that.
And I think it's important to stress the point, which is what the science reveals, is that there are exceptions to the rule, but the exception can never be the rule. And I think people need to understand that. So to take an exception in the case, and I think it's inevitable, if people keep dying from COVID, that you are going to get somebody who is fully vaccinated.
I think Barbados actually had 1 person.
Right, you are going to get it, 1 or 2. But that is the exception. And you cannot make the exception the rule. And I think it's very important to get that message across. What about your existing protocols? I know vaccine is there as the ultimate level. But what about your existing protocols?
For those persons who are thinking or coming to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you are required to enter with a negative PCR test. That's a nasal swab, where you have to do that at least 72 hours prior to your arrival in St. Vincent. You could be arriving via air, you could be connecting a flight, you could be arriving via sea. The PCR test is a must. We don't accept persons who come into the country without a PCR test. There are some Vincentians who may miss a connecting flight, and so the PCR test may be a few hours off, depending on where they are. We will allow them to enter under special conditions for their quarantining time and all of that. But you must enter with a PCR test. If you are vaccinated, you're eligible to get quarantine time for vaccinated passengers, which is 48 hours at an approved hotel. If you're not vaccinated, then you could fall in the category of high, medium, or low risk passengers. And so the quarantine time starts at 14 days maximum for high and very high. And then it could go all the way down to 7 and 5 days for those medium risk passengers. And low risk passengers are not required to vaccinate. But again, the PCR test is important.
Would it be helpful, and let's talk about the local situation, would it be helpful if there were more stringent measures in terms of laws, I suppose, to regulate where people gather, public transportation, for example, bars, restaurants? I know you have some measures in place, but now that we have the vaccine available, should we be talking about incorporating that vaccine passport, as it were, into our system? Should I be able to go to a barber, for example, if I am unvaccinated? And should a barber be unvaccinated? Do we need to step it up, Shanika?
We're definitely trying to get to 70% or more. And so once we start working towards that, then we're automatically targeting those people that you mentioned, you know, barbers, restaurants, movie theaters, spas, hairdressers, and so forth. And so I definitely think that we need to continue to push those persons. But I know sometimes people don't like to be nudged or pushed unless they're given an ultimatum to do so. And I know that's where, in terms of like the vaccine passports, for example, I know people who said to me that they're never going to take the vaccine. But as soon as they heard that they may need it for residency in the US
or to travel,
right, they automatically started taking their first shot. And so they're due for their second shot because they want to travel later on in the year. And so once, as a social and behavior change expert, it's important for us to understand that people would move once it benefits them as an individual. So you telling your barber that he needs to get vaccinated, what's the benefit to him? And so if he can't see eye to hospitalization, to death, to reducing transmission, he's not going to do it. But if you start telling him it's going to affect his income, where he's going to be able to see the difference, that he's going to lose his clientele, then he would start to shift his thinking in terms of where he.
But that takes time, you see, and
but behavior change takes time.
Right. So in the meantime, the virus is spreading, and I believe that something has to be done in the interim. We don't have the luxury of waiting for the barber to decide, well, yes, I get the point. You know, by the time he gets the point, many more are dead. You know, and I think that's where we're at. We're also at the end of the second segment. So when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business. More with my guests when we come back.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Fincensions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business. My guest is Ms. Shanika John. She is the Health Promotion Officer with the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and the Environment. Shanika, we have two more segments, so we've got quite a bit to cover, but I think we're doing good so far. Let's talk about COVID-19 and the workplace. I know a lot of the business people are concerned at least about the spread of COVID and how it impacts their business. So collectively, if businesses are being impacted, the economy is being impacted. And let's look at ways in which COVID-19 is actually taking a bite into business activity. An employee contracts COVID-19. What must that business do in terms of managing the spread?
All right. So before we even get to that point, I want to appeal to businesses and business owners, HR, top management persons, that this is really the time to get back to that basic managerial style for operating a business. And that includes keeping a log of the persons who are in the business, having updated information about your employees, where they live, current addresses, current active telephone numbers, etc. So you can update your database for that. And then, so when you move forward to when you do get a case or cases of COVID-19, you have information that you can hand over to the public health officials so that they could have documentation and proper contact tracing. Because you'll find that sometimes you get a number from the business place and you can't reach a person. The number is no longer available and no longer associated with the individual. So that's the first thing I really want to make an appeal for. Update your database in-house, whether it's paper or electronic, active addresses, active telephone numbers, and whatever information you think might be needed, but that's information that we need. If you do get a case or cases of COVID-19 in St. Vincent in your business, don't panic. I know that's not the best thing to say, right? But don't
okay.
Panic. Don't panic. We're in a pandemic. We have local transmission, local spread in St. Vincent, and it's going to happen. What we want you to first identify is who are the primary contacts to that individual. And those are the people who are close to the individual, less than 6 feet apart, without a mask for more than 15 minutes. And these are people who generally either share the same workspace, or they generally would interact in lunchtime together, or they're seen to be outside together, or maybe they even live together in some instances. Identify your close contacts and start there first. From your close contacts, we want them to quarantine for about 5 days and test on day 6. If they start to feel sick during that 5-day quarantine period, we encourage them to go to the flu clinic to get tested sooner, because remember we said with Delta, you could start experiencing your symptoms before. Once they go on their day 6 test negative, then they're automatically cleared unless otherwise advised by the public health official. If they do go for their day 6 test and then they're positive, we may have to take another layer in the workplace and do further investigation, especially if you have multiple positives with your primary contact. It could very well be that you're having a cluster, and a cluster means that you have a small group of cases within a localized localized location.
The thing about a person turning up positive, testing positive for COVID, having symptoms, feeling unwell and so on, and that person has been going to work, right? I follow the steps that you're giving as advice. What about the employees that are vaccinated? When you get up to the higher level of, actually getting close to closing down, do you treat the employees that are vaccinated differently to the ones that are unvaccinated?
Yes. And that again goes back to the science in terms of the transmission of the virus and so forth, which is lower in vaccinated and higher in unvaccinated. So for the vaccinated persons who've been maintaining the protocol of wearing the mask, sanitizing, have distance, you can actually have them to function during the workplace during that time with their masks on and everything. For the unvaccinated, we recommend that they do go home, simply because the transmission of the viral load is much going to be higher when they're physically on the job during that quarantine time, or even if they're waiting for a result within a 24-hour, 48-hour period. So we encourage vaccinated. We've done it before a couple of times with some business places. And so that has proven to be a good methodology as well on our part, because we always like to ensure that what we're doing is specific to our context. So we've tried that for some businesses in order for them to continue to operate. And so far we've had pretty good results.
In the case where, I know we're given the information here, but there's still going to be out there, a little confusion and uncertainty. I'm talking about the business owners or the managers. So if they're uncertain as to how to proceed, do they contact you? Is there a contact protocol or procedure um, to get the sort of advice as to how to move forward?
Okay, so my personal number is out there. I'm not gonna say because it's really out there.
Okay.
But you can definitely contact the Coronavirus Task Force svg@gmail.com. And you can write an email, very detailed email expressing what your situation is and that you're requesting guidance. Myself and some other officers, we do monitor that email from time to time. So the responses are quicker and we do jump on the cases much faster. If you do have my contact, you can call, message, reach out for specific guidance, and we will always point persons in the direction. What we don't want, though, is businesses trying to overwhelm the system by asking or trying to get all their staff members tested if this tests positive today. So this is positive today, and so you're calling to tell us that you have your staff of 40 persons and you want all 40 persons to get tested today. One, that's overwhelming our system, and two, that's not
Probably
tested from the
unnecessary.
exposure from this. That's testing prior before. If you do get through, because some persons, go through and they get somebody to do it. If you do get through, 5 days later, you have persons on your workplace who are sick. When they go to their flu clinic, they test positive, and then you say, how is that possible? They tested negative a couple of days ago, but they tested negative from a prior exposure and not the exposure from this.
Okay. So I fully understand that. Let's talk a bit about contact tracing. I'm interested to find out how it is that you manage to identify people who are at risk because of a possible contact. What's the maze that you go through?
So once you are tested positive for COVID-19, our team will then ask you to identify your contacts. And these are people that you would have been interacting with for the last 5 or 7 days. Start with the people in your home, the people in your work. If you have a spouse or partner outside of your home setting, we may ask you to also identify those persons, your friends, the people, the places that they visited during that time, etc. That information is logged and it's put in a queue, and sometimes we ask the individual just to hold it in the event that we need to go further. So let's say, for example, we have a contact who tested positive, and we say to Des, list your contacts. And then Des said, well, I have laptop, who was my main contact. We test laptop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Laptop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 test negative in the workplace. We don't go any further in the workplace. We advise persons in the workplace to monitor their symptoms. Right. If you do have any symptoms that is existing outside of this time, go to the flu clinic. Because remember, when you take a test, the test that you take is for that very second back. Doesn't go forward with you. So from the time you finish taking that test, immediately after you can become exposed to the virus in that particular instance. So you may start to have symptoms developing at a later time. Once we establish that, we close workplace. But let's say that Des also says Des went to Plug, a club, a bar, etc. And then we have 5 other persons from Plug stating that we went to Plug and then that's the last place we went and now we're testing positive. Then we go directly to Plug management and say, we need a list of persons who would have entered your establishment during this time. Can you provide us with the names? And so we might put out a notice to say, if you are at Plug between X and Y time, we encourage you to get tested because you potentially were exposed to a positive case, if we can find the persons. We've not done such announcement. I mean, I have it drafted and everything there. We've always been fortunate enough to be able to find people and to contact people, etc. So far, it has been good. But that's really the angle in which we use.
From listening to you, I imagine you have quite a bit of resources allocated to this contact tracing in terms of human resources. I don't see how else is possible. And they're probably working 24/7. And I really have to compliment you guys and the efforts that you're making. Although we're seeing the numbers nowhere near that you would like them to be in terms of the lowness. Let's get back to the vaccine again, because here we are talking about all the measures after the fact. But is the vaccine and the take-up of the vaccine, and I know you've answered it, but I want you to answer it again. That is, in your mind, what's going to arrest the spread and therefore minimize the work that you have to do in all this contact tracing and also what people have to do at the hospital in terms of care and providing some sort of comfort.
It will significantly. I mean, the UK, after administering the AstraZeneca to millions of people, saw a significant drop in terms of hospitalization. I remember I saw articles and videos online about healthcare workers saying that they could finally breathe because they no longer felt like they were on adrenaline running 24/7, 7 days a week, forever, because the hospitalization rush was significantly lower. And so that also in itself gave healthcare workers a chance to reboot and to refresh themselves and to be able to strategically plan ahead. Because I want to also say to the public, most of our persons who are operating our flu clinics, our vaccination, contact tracing are the same people. It's just a big group of people that you just try to segment. But I know for sure I have officers who are contact tracing officers, they're COVID-19 vaccination team leaders, and they also run a particular district. So I know.
Is there going to be a breaking point at some stage, Shanika? Because clearly that's not a sustainable activity. There's going to be a breaking point.
There has to be. But I really don't know when. At this point, we really try our best to have that sort of balance for our team. So especially when we'll give vaccine Monday to Saturday, Tony. We'll try to make it available in districts and in communities. I've been on several vaccination drives, and we try to allocate Sunday or Saturday, depending on the teams, to rest. And you would be amazed to see that people would still ask why vaccines not given on a Sunday. And so my thing is that the team needs some time to, one, connect with their family, to take care of other personal business, and to also give themselves a chance to recharge.
But in a sense, that's good news too, that people are actually requiring the vaccine on a Sunday, because it shows you that the demand is going up, which is really what you want.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go to our final break. When we come back, we'll be in our final segment. You're looking at Let's Get Down to Business. We'll be in our final segment with Miss Shanika John when we come back from the break.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Fincentions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
This is Let's Get Down to Business. My guest on this edition is Ms. Shanika John. Ms. Shanika John is the Health Promotion Officer in the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and the Environment. And health promotion you are, and you've certainly been kept busy, Shanika. We were talking about the amount of work that the few people have to be reinventing themselves and recharging themselves to do. And I must say, for a Monday morning, you don't show it. You look as if you were totally rested. So let's hope that you did get a chance to rest on the weekend. Let's look at some of the problems that you're having within your own system in terms of your health system. I do believe that there's still a significant percentage of your army that's not vaccinated. How do we explain that, Shanika?
So, I was in a conversation with some of our healthcare workers, and I said to them that, I'm working and we are working as hard to get persons to take the vaccine because as the trusted healthcare workers that you are, you've decided that it's time for you to, one, state your personal opinion, and two, to, in some instances, withhold this public health measure from people who would access it. Whereas a couple of years ago, when we look at the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine for children, I remember seeing healthcare workers and hearing healthcare workers don't ask any questions to mummies and daddies. It's just about this is what is important and this is what you need to take. And we recently did a study with a company that also revealed that people trust their local doctors, nurses from the community. And so when you have persons from the community not taking the vaccine or in this particular category, then the community then see Ministry of Health officials, administrative control or otherwise as external. And so my people not doing it, and you are outside of that, so I'm going to listen to my people.
That clearly must be the biggest undermining factor in your message. I can't see any other way of looking at it. If the healthcare workers who are supposed to provide healthcare for our nation, and we are in a pandemic, and we are using the science as we have done prior COVID for other diseases, other ailments. Okay? Medicine is a field of science. And why should we then make an exception in the case of COVID-19 and not other things that we have dealt with, like tetanus, like measles, like all the other things that, well, causes an individual to ingest or to be injected with a substance that that science has proven to be the best means of fighting that ailment. So I see it as totally illogical and must be a very difficult proposition for you as health promotion officer to speak as the leader, but then people in your army are saying she's talking rubbish.
Yes, it started out very rough. I didn't allow it to shake me too much, but it was very rough, but it is better now. Better in terms of we have more of our healthcare workers who are vaccinated. We have more persons who are in the line for vaccination, and I refer to them as in the line because they're neither at the front and they're neither at the back. They're somewhere in the line. They might slip out of the line and just walk away, or they might just run closer to the front or run closer to the back. And so we're continuing to work with them. The one-on-one sessions and engagement were very helpful in helping people to understand, giving people a chance to express themselves. And so once they've crossed that line for vaccination, I'd often encourage them to go back to your community. Go back to your health district, because these people are looking up to you. They're looking for you to guidance, because we've had instances where healthcare professionals were asked, which vaccine is better for me? And the response was, none of them good. Or we've had instances where healthcare providers would say the best vaccine is the vaccine that's the best for you, but which one did you take, nurse or doctor? And so there's a break there because you can't really say because you're not vaccinated. And so that in itself sort of ruffled the distrust. But I think apart from our healthcare workers getting vaccinated, more of our Vincentian public is also seeing the importance of vaccination as well. So we have the average public who's also encouraging their doctors and nurses to get vaccinated.
About children, I know the Pfizer you're using that for 12 years and older. But isn't there going to come a time when below 12 years has to be looked at?
Yes, there is going to come a time, and I saw a number of literature pointing in that direction as well. But we're waiting on the official from WHO and the go-ahead to vaccinate. And I know we have some parents who are very eager to get their under 12 children vaccinated for multiple reasons. There are a lot of children who may be asthmatic, and a parent cannot just start to comprehend and understand why they would have their child exposed to COVID. And so they want to give them that internal protection.
Right.
But we really have to wait on the science in order for us to be pointed in that direction. But I can definitely see it's coming.
Yeah, and I mean, we are going to open schools at some stage, I suppose. And I believe that having a vaccine available for children, school children, below the age of 12 is perhaps a good tool to have in toolkit. Do you see an end to all of this? I mean, is it looking bleak? Do you see an end in sight? Are we going to get to that level where the spread is minimized and we get back to some form of normalcy? You, from where you sit.
I see it, but I also think it's going to be unique to every state, every country.
Mm.
In St. Vincent, I think it's going to take us a little bit longer to get there.
Mm.
One, our vaccination rate is extremely low, and compliance to some of our very basic protocols is almost non-existent to some persons and some establishments. And so that's going to really contribute to either a spike in cases, also contribute to persons not getting vaccinated. So I think in St. Vincent, it's there, but it's not as close as I would like it to be. I mean, I would love for by the end of the year, by the end of the year, December, we get to 70% or more. And so you could start to reform and think strategically for the next new year. But I'm still hopeful, but it doesn't seem realistically possible.
Let's talk about some of the alternatives that people claim are more effective than the vaccine for dealing with COVID. There are a few things out there. Ivermectin is one of them. Am I pronouncing it right?
Ivermectin?
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
I see the name and I really rather not say it. That's one of them. The cordial silver or something like that. That's another one that's being promoted by a fringe group. What is your response to, or the Ministry of Health's response to these alternatives that are being advocated?
Persons generally want to find natural ways to boost their immune system. So, for example, rather than taking some vitamin C tablets or some vitamin C dissolvables in water, people may choose to go towards guava and tamarind because those are good sources of vitamin C. Nothing is wrong with that. When you start taking medications that are not prescribed to treat a specific disease or illness and trying to interface with, to see the possibility, to me, that's just as risky as saying that you're not taking the vaccine, you rather take your chance with COVID. Because that could be very detrimental, especially in instances where it's not a proven methodology for this course of treatment. Right now, there is no treatment for COVID. I had a caller on a program the other day who said to me that zinc and vitamin D and vitamin D3 cure COVID. And we actually offer zinc, vitamin D, and D3 to persons who are positive for COVID in St. Vincent. But that's really just to support their body.
Yeah.
It doesn't cure it. It's not a treatment for it. It's just that it helps your body to get that defense. Just like supplements that you're taking in order for you to function during this time. If you have a treatment for COVID, if you have a particular diagnosis that works for COVID, I mean, I would encourage you to sell it to the bigger countries because we're looking for a way out. But be mindful of the experimental drugs that persons are using, that the herbal remedies that people may have and say this is better for this and this cure this, because you could really be harming yourself more.
And of course, the logic is that there are certain viruses, there are certain illnesses that regardless of how strong an individual you are in terms of your immunity and all that, the virus can be stronger than that. And that's a reality. HIV is a typical example. If people thought that just being healthy and strong and having a good immune system was all that it took to get through life, then HIV and AIDS would not be an issue. All we'd have to do is just eat the right stuff and go about having unprotected sex, and we're okay.
And I mean, people confuse the natural and herbal remedies to say that if I take this particular drug, I'm protecting my immune system, and so it doesn't stop you from getting COVID. Because I know people who are on that particular path, but it didn't prevent them or stop them from getting COVID. And when they do got COVID, the severity of the disease still took its natural course. And that's what we're saying with vaccine.
Yeah.
If you take the vaccine, it doesn't prevent you or stop you from getting it. But what we can guarantee is that if you do get COVID, your symptoms are mild. I have a student right now who is COVID-19 positive, and she has been home in isolation. She's been able to function in her classes. She's been able to do all of her exams, everything during her isolation period. And I would check in with her and I would say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And she said, I feel fine.
And of course, I think it's important to also mention that there are going to be people who are not vaccinated who will get COVID and who will recover.
Yes.
And maybe just do fine. But that is not in of itself a reason to expose those unfortunate ones. And as we see, the numbers are rising, moving from serious illness to death. And as we're talking about that, let us also look at a bit of long COVID issues. The people who have gotten seriously ill but recover, are they out of the woods?
For the people who have recovered from COVID-19, I always ask them, how do you feel? And, they have serious breathing issues, difficulty breathing. They don't have as much stamina as they used to, and they don't have as much endurance as they used to. And I think persons were circulating the video with our famous cricketer, Darren Samuel.
Yeah.
And he also expressed some of the difficulty. Sammy, yes. He also expressed the difficulty and his experience with COVID-19. And his message was clear. I got it. I survived. And I couldn't imagine doing this without the COVID-19 vaccine.
So he did better.
He did.
Having had the vaccine.
Better.
And I think that's the point you want to get across to people as far as the vaccine is concerned. In a few, we have just about 1 minute or so to wrap up. I wanted to bring up some of the conspiracy stuff that is happening locally. Like when you publish your numbers, there are people saying, oh, you're lying. You're only trying to say that this person died of COVID-19 when they died of something else, and so on. How are you managing that?
We tend to respond with the facts. We've already stated how we do our analysis or assessment for persons who have died. How do you diagnose somebody who has died from COVID-19? What's the procedure that has gone through there? And at the same time, I think people don't want to accept the reality of which we live in. That our deaths are going to increase, and it's getting closer and closer to home, because now we could identify with the individuals who have passed. We know the persons who are hospitalized. When I say we, I mean general population. Yes. We know who they are. And so when you hear one person have passed, you kind of in shock, because, I would have interacted with this person next week. And so there is a little denial there at the same time. People don't want to accept what's happening. But the reality of it is that we're going to still continue to post accurate information.
Are you seeing a higher demand in relation to the increased number of deaths? Higher demand for the vaccine?
Yes, definitely.
Unfortunately, that's not the driver you want.
That's not the drive that we want, exactly. And I said that to somebody. I said, this is not what we really wanted to go. But in some particular areas that have been really affected, there's a heavy cry for the vaccine. There are persons who are sick, and they may even try to take the vaccine while they're sick. And we say to them, are you sick? Have you been experiencing these flu-like symptoms? When was the last time you were tested? And so we really don't advise people who are positive to take the vaccine. And we've seen that people are positive and they wanted if they could take the vaccine now. At this point, it is too late. We want you to go through that period for at least 4 weeks before you can then start thinking about taking the vaccine.
Shanika, we're at the end of the program. I'm going to give you, you said a lot, but I'm still going to give you 30 seconds to give your final word of advice to people out there in relationship to the vaccine.
Wash your hands, keep your distance, wear your face mask properly, and before it is too late, get vaccinated.
And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Let's Get Down to Business. My guest was Ms. Shanika John, who is the Health Promotion Officer in the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and the Environment. Do join us the next time Let's Get Down to Business is.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Pensions that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.